Welcome to Vernacular Verbose, Jethro Tull podcast. My name's Joey Vetter.
My name's Eugene Manko.
Today we're taking a look at Roots to Branches, released in 1995. If you're a fan of the podcast and are feeling generous, you can always support us on Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/vernacularverbose. Any donations will go right back into the production of the podcast by helping us cover our editing costs. Again, that's ko-fi.com/vernacularverbose. If you haven't heard already, we'll be doing our first official live stream on January 29th on YouTube. Eugene and I will be listening to the new Tull album, The Zealot Gene, for the very first time in full together, and we'll be giving our immediate reactions and impressions as we listen. If you're interested, you can tune in to the live stream and share that experience with us of listening to the first original new Tull album in 20 some odd years together, as we all kind of listen in for the first time and give our comments. If you're interested in that, you can find on our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you can find a post or link on there, which will take you to the YouTube page for the stream where you can set a reminder for when we go live. In terms of time zones, we'll be going live in the afternoon in the US on the 29th and in the evening in the UK. Please make sure to check the information on our social media for the exact time in your time zone. So Roots to Branches, this is one that, Eugene, you and I were kind of talking about ahead of time, that we're both pretty excited to be talking about this one.
Oh, yeah.
So I think this one actually has quite a legacy, this album, which is kind of interesting for a Tull album that came out in the mid-90s. You know, there's not a lot of later Tull albums you can say that about. Mm-hmm. I think that this one has kind of a reputation among a lot of fans as being like the best Tull album in a long time. That's often something that I hear about this album, that I see people saying that they think this is one of the best Tull albums since the 70s or the early 80s or whatever.
Well, you would hear that from me, I think. Although, as I was researching some of the songs on this album, because I was slightly confused by some of the lyrics and I wanted to see if other people have anything to say about them, I saw people just laying into this album like quite harsh criticism about some songs, and which I fully disagreed with, but that's par for the course. People could disagree with us, as it were. So yeah, I have heard also people say that they really like this album, but not in much detail. And just looking at what people think of some of the songs, I still don't know what people think about it, really.
Yeah.
Just what they rank it. Some of them rank it high, some of them don't rank it high enough, in my opinion. But yeah, there is some consensus about it, but there also is lack of information, lack of feedback in the fan community, I feel.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think this is one album that sticks out to me, if for no other reason, just that I think it's really different from the last couple of albums that preceded it. So I think we've mentioned this a bit in our last two episodes, but as we've listened to these albums and I've kind of become more familiar with, the Rock Islands and the Catfish Risings of the discography and that kind of thing, it's kind of put it more in perspective for me, where that side of the discography seems to me more as, a phase in time or an era of the band's history. And to me, Roots to Branches is kind of, it's really coming out of that. It's leaving that old dad rock, or whatever you want to call it, era behind in Tull. And in a way, it's both getting to something new with kind of the whole Eastern Arabic influenced music and that kind of thing. But to me, it's also kind of returning to what you might call, natural Tull or normal Tull, or however you want to call it. It's kind of a fresh start, new beginning for Tull, even, 30 years after their career had started.
It does feel like that to me. What would you say was natural Tull or normal Tull? What is more natural or normal on this album that you think compared to the late 80s albums?
To me, a lot of it just has to do with Ian kind of leaving behind his whole persona of kind of like the rugged, highwayman, which is kind of what I felt he was adopting on a lot of the past 2 or 3 albums. And, I can't knock what Ian wants to write about. Like, obviously, he's his own person. He'll write about whatever he wants to write about. That's fine. But to me, it always felt like a persona that was kind of forced. And it may just be because, there was already 20, 25 some odd years of material before that where that kind of persona wasn't really there, in my opinion. And to this, it kind of feels more like reverting to the mean of, progressive influenced music that's more in the wheelhouse of what is more familiar, I think, for a Tull fan to hear, in my opinion.
I think Ian has always had personas.
Yeah.
Like, all the albums have been written from the perspective of one persona or another. So it may well be just adopting a new one, adopting yet another different persona that is more in tune with what we think of as Tull.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that the ways that people describe this album, when I hear people talking about this album or when I see critics who have written blurbs about this album or something, the thing they usually latch on to is the whole Eastern Arabic music thing that I just mentioned. So a lot of, I see this labeled as kind of like the world music album or that kind of thing. And I don't really agree with that much. Obviously I see where it comes from. There's undeniably, quote unquote world music influences on quite a few of these songs, I think especially in the first half. But I don't really know if I would say that it's strong enough to characterize the entire album through that lens, because I think there's a lot of other tracks on this album which don't really adhere to that style. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, it doesn't strike me as, mindless Orientalism, what they're doing here.
Yeah.
They are using modes and melodic, you could almost say melodic cliches of music that we think of as Oriental, but they are not trying to picture an Oriental scene by the means of that music. Some of the lyrics also kind of refer to pictures that Ian had seen in India or Middle East, possibly. But still, it doesn't strike me as stylized music, as it were.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it doesn't come off as inauthentic. I think it sounds like they really cared about that style of music and they actually did their due diligence on researching it and not just doing a pastiche of it, or however you want to call it.
Yeah, and they're not even using a style of music. They're using modes, which are like major key and a minor key are also modes. And the two very prominent modes they're using are Phrygian, which is like minor, but it's got that half step of the root note. The motion in half steps, which you hear on many of the songs, will be that. Or Phrygian dominant, which is a popular Eastern motif that you will hear in tunes like Miserlou, which is a Greek song, actually, but hey, Greek music also uses a lot of melodic modes like that. And they're making use of these melodic devices and applying them to their own music. So they're not copying other people's music or other people's styles, what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I agree.
So you haven't listened to this album in how long?
I haven't listened to the full album in a while. I would at least a couple of years. But that being said, I was kind of familiar with this. I was familiar with most of it coming into it, just because, not really because I had the album as a kid or anything specific, but I just had listened to a decent amount of it on YouTube and stuff growing up. So I would agree that this is the best Tull album since the mid-'80s, is what I would say. And actually, I will keep this a surprise so people will listen further in the episode. But there is one song on this album that I actually might say is one of the best Tull songs since the 70s.
I'm very excited to hear that. Yeah, I did have this album as a kid. I think I mentioned it on the podcast several times, so I'll just give a short recapitulation of that. My dad brought a cassette from one of his business trips. I think it was like 95, the year that the album came out. And we listened to it, we loved it. It was the first cassette in my life that had the fold-out lyric insert. And it was glorious. It was something I had never seen up until then, and I absolutely loved it. I read it, I took it out, I don't know how many times. The last song, Another Harris Bar, was printed on the side of the insert, on the side that goes into the cassette, that's folded, and it had perforations. So I would try to be real careful with that, but of course over time it started falling apart. Yeah, I loved that cassette. I don't remember whether I was not supposed to take it to school in my Walkman, or whether just I thought it would better be that I didn't, but I did. And I have some memories listening to it, like on the bus on the way home from school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really unusual to, like, I mean, at least just in my experience, because most of the good, like, childhood memories I had with Tull music was, like, older Tull, like Thick as a Brick and Songs from the Wood and that kind of thing. So it's really interesting for me to, like, hear of somebody else's experience where really modern Tull, you know, relatively speaking, modern Tull was like a really strong nostalgic childhood thing.
Yeah, and as we've been recording this podcast, I'm trying not to listen ahead as much as I possibly can, right? So that every album experience is somewhat fresher. And so I put off listening to it. I didn't re-listen since at least the spring. And I think possibly just coming from Crest Rock Island and Catfish Rising and being immersed in that era and coming back to this album, it feels like this was one of the most emotional album released since the beginning of the podcast, since Passion Play, possibly. Of course, it doesn't really depend just on the album or how much I love a given album. It also depends on, you know, the mood, the time of day, the situation, and so on. But yeah, when I first sat down to listen to it without stopping to write notes, I just wrote a couple lines. It was fantastic. Had to wipe tears a few times.
It was definitely a breath of fresh air for me. It really kind of felt like coming out of somewhere less pretty and less smooth. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It felt like kind of just a breath of fresh musical air is what it felt like to me.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it was like for people who had been following Tull up until then, and then they disappeared for like 4 years.
Yeah, the context
came back with this.
The context of how this happened is a bit interesting, I guess. And I don't know a lot about, you know, the behind the scenes of like how this album was put together or anything. But I do know that, you know, the years 1993, 94 were really big years for Tull because that's when they went on the 25th anniversary tour, which was a really huge tour. It was like one of the biggest tour itineraries I think the band had ever done. So, and there was a lot of focus around that anniversary event. There were lots of compilations and reissues and that kind of thing that came out around the same time. So, in a way, I don't know. I feel like if you watch footage of the band from that time, from kind of 93, 94, Roots to Branches, in a way, feels like kind of a natural byproduct. Just because, I don't know what other way to put this, but Tull at that time were very mid-90s. And the entire, you know, the 90s had its own aesthetic and its own style. And I think, you know, anybody who was a kid who was raised in the 90s, and yes, I was actually raised in the 90s, part of the 90s, I think they kind of understand what that aesthetic was like. And this album has a lot of that aesthetic on it, both for better and for worse, in my opinion. I think you can kind of hear that time period on the album. Yeah,
that's true. The keyboard sounds, and to me, I think the drums sound like the 90s.
Yeah, I agree.
The rest, probably not. The rest could be on other Tull albums just as well, but I think the drum sounds and some of the keyboards definitely have that.
So Tull at this time, in terms of the member lineup, they were kind of becoming a settled band again, or they were soon to become a settled band with like a proper member for each instrument and that kind of thing, which they hadn't really been for a while. And the lineup at this time on this album was Ian Anderson on flute, vocals, acoustic guitar, Martin Barr on electric guitar. Dave Pegg was officially on bass, although he actually only played on 3 tracks on this album. And the rest was by Steve Bailey, who is an American session musician. Andrew Giddings was now the official member on keyboards, and then, of course, Don Perry on drums.
It's interesting because if there's no mistake in the credits, then no one is credited for playing bass on track 4, This Free Will, which I don't know whether that's Ian playing or someone else, but there definitely isn't. I checked Discogs, I think several issues, and there isn't a credit for bass on track 4, which felt surprising to me because there's a couple bass moments in that specific song that kind of took me by surprise, and I thought, hey, what's going on with the bass there? It's quite neat.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It was just when I was looking at the track liner notes, that kind of popped out at me like, wait, that doesn't add up with all the different track listings for the bass players. So I don't know, it doesn't sound like keyboard bass, does it? Is it Andrew Giddings again?
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. It sounds like a bass guitar. Track listing wise, also should be noting that I'm used to the track listing on the cassette, and the cassette swapped Valley with Wounded Old and Treacherous. And as I was listening to the album back, I actually put the tracks in that order to have the cassette experience, because I listened to that so much that I'm anticipating these songs in these places and not the other way around. So I don't know. I gave it a listen in the proper order again yesterday. I'm not sure which track listing I think works better. It might be the cassette.
Yeah, I never even knew that the cassette had a different track listing until you mentioned it to me.
Yeah, it's just to save space. It gives a better split between sides, so you don't have to rewind really.
So I remember you mentioning that the cover art for this album is one of your favorites in the whole discography.
Oh yeah, totally. I really love it. Hands down, one of the best Tull covers. It really depends on how well it is printed, though, because I've seen different, online I saw different reproductions of that, and we had like a bootleg CD of that as well, which wasn't printed very well. That little noisy background that the image sits on, it needs to be quite deep and quite crisp at the same time. It shouldn't be too light, because when it's too light it becomes too noisy, and it's like the image is sitting on TV static or something. But when it's printed well with good color reproduction and actually becomes a deeper color, and you can see the little specks when you focus on it, then it works really well. What do you think about this cover?
So I don't want to be labeled a heretic or anything, but I don't think I like it as much as you do. I think the concept of it is really cool. I like the concept of, when you have like that center thing with, if you pay attention to the details of the kind of the ring that goes around it, it's really interesting. It's all different kinds of, things that represent both nature and, man-made structures and that kind of thing. And I think that's cool. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with the concept of it. I just think aesthetically, it's probably the single part of the album that leans too much into the mid-90s aesthetic, which is not, it's nobody's fault, of course. It's just, that's what happens to things as they age with time. But I think for me, it's kind of, when I look at it, it immediately looks to me like it was kind of made in the thing you used to do on Microsoft Paint, where you could make like 3D like words and stuff that everybody thought was cool in like middle school. That's kind of what it looks like to me.
Like word art.
Word art, yeah, that's it. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Yeah,
it's clearly digital because it's got these gradients, but again, I think the gradients work nicely. And I like the color balance of it. I like the overall impression that it gives. Yeah, I like this cover. I think not as much of a fan of the typeface.
Yeah, I was going to point that out too. I think it does signal kind of like a new style for the band, though. I think even though, like, I don't know, design-wise, it's sort of similar to Catfish Rising in terms of having that big black background with the thing in the center, the gradient thing. But I think it does kind of signal something new and different for the band at the time.
Yeah, 95 was a good year for progressive rock. There wasn't much progressive rock being played at that time, but Roots to Branches and Thrack by King Crimson were both brilliant albums, in my opinion. I really love Thrack. It's got one of my absolutely favorite King Crimson songs ever, One Time. And to people who haven't heard it, just go and listen to it after you've done with our episode.
Track 1, Roots to Branches.
Words get written, words get twisted.
So right off the bat, I know I say that every time, but right off the bat, a lot of effort put into the opening of this track is really interesting. They clearly spent a lot of time trying to kind of get this like hazy opening And it's very interesting, like the different kinds of percussion, which is kind of all over this album, not just on this song, but a lot of different percussion they brought in just to use on this intro.
Yeah, and it signifies straight away what kind of music we're going to be hearing on the album, because the opening riff is based around the Phrygian mode, so we're shown very clearly where the album will be taking us. This song is, well, compared to the Tull albums we've been listening to lately, and even earlier ones, is a little unusual because it's not a high energy first track like we've been hearing most of the time since, I don't know, Stormwatch. It actually reminds me a little bit of Beastie, which has that same slow and dark and slightly foreboding mood which it sets. And we know, like, when they do that on Broadsword, it takes some time to get to a higher energy track. The exact same thing is happening here. This is a great song. There's a brilliant moment in Martin's guitar solo when he's playing what appears to be a very straightforward run of just groups of 4 notes, just climbing up. But Dawn switches to 6/8 underneath that, while the entire track is in 4/4. But in that moment, Dawn switches to 6/8, and it gives a completely different polyrhythmic feel to that little moment. And then they just go play a little bit of 3, just dum 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 dum.
Yeah, I was going to mention that moment because this is the first time I've heard this entire song from front to back in a while, and so a lot of the times when I are going back to songs that I haven't heard front to back, I often forget what the bridge was like, and so this was the first time I've heard the bridge in a while, and I forgot how progressive it was. And then, like you said, they kind of go into that like random jazz passage, which is kind of funny.
Thematically, I think that this song is interesting because Ian put out Divinities in the same year, and that album in its concept, it was of course completely instrumental, but the concept was evident from the cover art and the track names. It was ecumenical. It was like bringing together the views from different religions and looking at them and looking at what's beautiful in nature and in man-made things through that lens. And this is kind of a different view of the same. I think in the lyrics, we are exploring a God that has to be different for everyone, while everyone is spinning their own story and their own power fantasy, probably. I mean, that line, I hope the old man's got his face on. He'd better be some quick change artist, as in a God who has to be a different God for everyone, for every religion and for every priest and for every person who's praying. This song has a hint of the songwriting approach that I've come to notice in later Ian Anderson songs. And I will be coming back to it a lot I think on .com. And if we're going to talk about later albums as well. When he leans too much into it, I probably tend to dislike it, but not here. It's what I call kaleidoscopic writing. It's when he's utilizing like a flurry of images that aren't really connected to each other. It's kind of cinematic and kind of kaleidoscopic, and it's kind of like flicking through a stack of photographs or different images, like looking in different directions. In this song, the images are connected by conclusions and commentary, and this is what makes it work. Ian comments on what he's seeing, but also the overall trick in this song is to kind of make it cryptic. So what I mean is like small phrases, short phrases, in wet and windy priest holes, grand and vast cathedrals, high on lofty minarets or in the temples of doom, listing images, listing various pictures. But the cryptic effect that it gives to this song, it works very well with its idea, because the song is about messages. The messages that are understood and misunderstood. Words get written, words get twisted. Old meanings move in the drift of time. So the song in itself being a cryptic message is a really, really effective literary device, I should say.
Yeah, the whole thing about kaleidoscopic writing, one of the immediate examples that it makes me think of, if I'm thinking of the right thing you are, on Homo Eroticus, I remember there being one song where he kind of goes into a passage of just kind of random, non-associated words.
Yeah.
And it's the one that has like Facebook and The Walking Dead in it.
It's Enter the Uninvited.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is exactly what I mean.
When it comes to Ian's vocals, not on this song, not just on this song, but on this whole album, to me, this is kind of the first album where it sounds like he's trying to hit some notes that are out of his range. What do you think?
I don't get that impression a lot. I think it feels on this album that he's not straining himself too much. Maybe I'm not noticing it. Maybe I'm just too used to hearing it, and when I first heard it, I wasn't really thinking about how he sounded or what was going on with his voice.
I do think that just from like a neutral perspective, this is the most recent Tull album where his voice sounds like his voice today, if you know what I mean. So in other words, the Ian Anderson vocals on Thick as a Brick 2 and Homo Eroticus, to me they kind of sound similar to the same voice that you hear on Roots to Branches. And to me it's kind of the earliest example of that like modern, 21st century Ian Anderson voice. Because I remember when I was a kid, when I first heard Thick as a Brick, the CD, like the actual album for the first time, I couldn't believe that was the same guy who I had been hearing on like YouTube videos and live stuff and all that kind of thing. Because he sounds so different on so many different records, and I think this is kind of where you start to hear the Ian that we know today in the 21st century.
Yeah, if you examine the keys that the songs are written in, you just progressively notice them getting lower and lower and lower, because that's where his comfort zone lies these days. And on Roots to Branches, there are a lot of songs written in C, which is a little bit unprecedented for Tull. We've been all over G minor, on earlier albums, and this is a fifth down. A lot of the songs. There is a song in G minor here actually, but of course he doesn't get too high vocal wise in that.
So musically, you probably know more about this than I do, but I seem to remember reading and hearing that he switched to a different kind of flute on some of these songs. I think
this one is a small bamboo flute.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm not knowledgeable enough about flutes to really notice a huge difference in the sound, but I remember hearing that he was playing more bamboo flutes and smaller flutes around this time.
Yeah, I think it sounds brilliant here. I really like it.
And the only other thing I had musically on this one was just the drum part for this one. Actually, it sounds very Clive Bunkerish to me. I've kind of described in the past how Clive Bunker's parts to me, they're very much like octopus drum parts, where there's one hand is kind of all over the kit on different toms and that kind of thing, and it feels to me like Doane is kind of doing that here. So I don't know. I don't know if it was intentional, but it sounded like to me a callback to Clive Bunker almost.
Yeah, it could be. There are a few interesting drum parts on this one.
Yeah,
I think a few songs where I think Doane is doing. Well, we still don't know which things are characteristic for Doane or not at this point, do we?
Yeah, one thing I have caught on to, so our last album on Catfish Rising, I mentioned the very beginning fill of the album, which sounded a lot to me like a Lars Ulrich Metallica fill. I've noticed quite a lot of those on this album. He likes doing those, just kind of the big, like, I don't know how I'd explain them, but just lots of full tom fills going back and forth from the snare to the toms.
Yeah, and Martin, I think, stopped playing so many pinch harmonics. So there are a few, even in this song, I think, but he doesn't lean into them, so it becomes more tasteful. It becomes just another color. So I think he kind of finally incorporated them into his own style.
Yeah,
I think he had enough of them in every solo he played during the 80s. Track 2, Rare and Precious Chain.
Rare and precious chain. Do I have to tell you once again?
Like I said, when Tull starts on a low energy track like Roots to Branches, they take the time to get to a higher energy song, and this is the transitional one in terms of mood on the album. It develops what's been set by the title track. Again, there's a lot of Phrygian on this song. You can hear it in the main melody, and in the main melody you have the Phrygian dominant, which has that large jump between notes in one of the places, but it's got Phrygian dominant and it's got regular Phrygian in choruses across different key centers. So it's a really progressive approach to melodic modes, unlike just choosing one and sticking to it throughout the entire songs. It moves around quite a bit. There's a brilliant, I feel, this song is very centered on percussion, it feels like.
Yeah.
And I really like how the acoustic guitar rhythm works with what the drums are playing and what the percussion adds to it. And there's also electric guitar that adds to the percussiveness. I think there's with the use of delay on like palm muted notes. And I think the sound of this song is just even more unusual than what we've heard on the title song, and even more slightly unexpected, and I think quite brilliantly put together in terms of production, in terms of how different instruments work with each other, to the point that you don't really feel them being different instruments, like the percussive parts enhanced by the palm muted guitar. It's really an ensemble that's playing this. How do you feel?
Yeah, this one is really cool. I really like it. So this is, one of the tracks that leans the most into kind of, the Eastern Indian Arabic. I'm not educated enough to know exactly what influence this particular song is in, but it's one of the songs that is leaning the most into that. But at the same time, it doesn't feel, gimmicky or inauthentic, which I think is an accomplishment whenever you're dealing with, different kinds of world music styles like that. And there's a lot of, the guitar is so central to this song, I think. And there's a lot of really cool guitar tones that Martin's using, a lot of which I feel like he's never really used before. A lot of them sound quite new for him, the way that he's using guitar in this track.
Yeah, the guitar in the chorus or bridge, whatever you want to call that, the No Gold of Fools, etc. There's a guitar that's following what the strings are playing, or vice versa. The strings and the guitar are playing the same motif, and the guitar is kind of in the background to the strings. But then on the last line, the strings cut out and double-tracked guitars appear, who kind of reply to these first three lines in a different key, key center. And that's such a sonically brilliant moment. And the way the timbre of the guitar works with the strings, I think throughout the entire album, they've really, I think, found a combination. They found a production technique, a mixing technique where the sounds of the keyboards and the guitars complement each other so well.
Yeah.
That it really feels like ensemble playing, that none of these parts is more important than the other, but they all combine to a whole. While on the previous albums we've been kind of listening and saying that these keyboards sound really 80s because they stack out.
Yeah.
They felt like, here's a keyboard part. Here, even though some of the keyboard sounds do give us a kind of a 90s impression, they are still mixed together with the rest of the band so well that you don't really notice them as being separate from everything else, if you know what I mean, if I'm making sense. Maybe I'm just so used to this album that it kind of imprinted on me.
I was going to mention the keys because the degree to which they're used for atmosphere on this song and other songs on this album is kind of interesting. And I feel like it's kind of in a way that hasn't really been done before, at least to this degree on Tull songs. There's a lot of songs on this album where it feels like the main job of the keyboards is to provide atmosphere. Not necessarily to play melodies or play chords or that kind of thing. And this is one of those songs. And like you said, the key sounds haven't aged great, but I think they've aged better than some of the 80s ones. So it's pretty interesting. I think some of that is actually continued on .com even. To a certain degree, the way that the keys are used for atmosphere. Maybe that was just an Andrew Giddings thing. I don't know.
I think it was, yeah. I think it was one of the things that he enjoyed doing. The bass is slightly slappy. I think I've noticed in a couple of places, but there's not too much high end on it, so you don't really notice that it's slap. It's just kind of a choice of attack. But it does have, I think, a couple of slap bass moments. The lyrics on this one, what I wrote down was mildly erotic and, dare I say, slightly BDSM. However, this song has no hint anymore of this self-conscious, uncomfortable sexual tension that Ian has been putting into some of the songs that I've been criticizing. So we're past that.
Yeah.
We're into a better songwriting territory. This one also has a bit of the kaleidoscopic approach, feels like. But like this one, Forgotten Rooms, Dark Catacombs, all of those. But this here is very cinematic. We get flashes of different things and places coming out of the dark. And there's a reason for that, because as per the song, they all come back to you. It's a song about flashes of memory. So this approach is necessary and is apposite. We're supposed to be like piecing the story together.
Yeah.
From these separate images. Like we got no crock of glittering prizes, no sharply worded telegram, no excuses for the word weary. These are, I don't have a better word for it. These are flashes, and they come across as such.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of effort put into the drums and the percussion part that, like you mentioned. I don't know the word for what this is, if this is a specific instrument or technique or something, but the sound of something kind of being like slapped on the floor is kind of what it sounds like. I don't know what that is, but it's something that you hear in kind of ethnic music, or however you want to put that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can like put a specific instrument to that sound in my mind, but
yeah, something which you usually hear in Indian or Arabic music, I think.
Is it supposed to be an imitation of the sound of the whip?
It sounds like a whip, yeah. Track 3, Out of the Noise.
Glued to the curbstone staring, frozen at the stop sign too. See that crazy suicide.
I love this song. I think this is one of the best tracks on the album. And it's really interesting because there's things happening on this track that I don't feel like the band have ever really done before. Yeah, there's a very like kind of jazzy funk light sound to this song. And especially with Martin, I feel like Martin is playing parts on here that he's never really played before on Tull material. It's a lot of like really funky jazz guitar parts. And not just the songwriting itself, but I think this song is mixed really, really well. It comes across really clear, and especially the bass sounds really great. It sounds very punchy, and we're really in the middle of the mix as opposed to being buried under it or that kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's a very groove-based song.
Yeah.
So we're up to the high energy moment being brought here from the slightly understated title track. The intro, it feels rhythmically confusing, like there's many songs that begin in such a way where you don't really know where the one is.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of famous examples, like the Beatles' Drive My Car. And I actually took the time to just cut the song up and superimpose parts of it onto one another and see that what they're playing in the intro is no different to what they're playing when the drums actually give us the point of reference further down. But I still can't hear it the same way as when the drums cue in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's quite confusing, and it's great.
I really like the intro, I think, just because it's a very percussive, rhythmic intro. It's very much... it's an intro that you could have written on drums, I think. It wouldn't surprise me if that's how that intro came about and that kind of thing.
Yeah, lots of pauses in it, like sort of Fillingdale Flyer situation.
Yeah.
Where you don't really know where you are until you've got the beat. There's another interesting rhythmic thing in this song. I'm talking about the choruses. I'm talking about the way the choruses begin on the first line, the line, Old Dog of Experience. I noticed that Ian sings this line in a different way every chorus. There's 3 choruses, and on the first one, the word dog lands on the 1. So it goes, Old Dog of Experience. And in the second chorus, the word dog lands after the 1. So the 1 lands squarely between the 2, between old and dog, old dog. And the third chorus, the Old Mutt of Experience, is the hybrid of the 2, because the word old is kind of earlier, like in the first chorus, and mutt is after the 1, like in the second chorus. 3 different lines.
Yeah, I can hear that now that you pointed it out.
Yeah, again, I just cut them up and overlaid them one on top of the other, and you can really hear how it comes back to a synchronized line on the ripping through the black and yellow caps.
Mm-hmm. There's also some kind of John Evans-esque Hammond organ sounds going on, like and organ stabs and that kind of thing.
Yeah. In terms of lyrics, I don't think there's much, hidden depths in this song. It's a song about a dog, which is brilliant. I think it's a great moment in Ian's songwriting when he writes about various characters, and this time this is not even a human. Like we've had that before. Like we've had songs about mice and songs about horses, and now this is a song about a dog. The line, "Some towns I know he could end up in a restaurant," feels to me like a bit of a callback to the slightly questionable bits from Thick as a Brick newspaper, where there's a story about a couple who had their dog cooked and served for them on holiday. But yeah, very cinematic lyric. Also, I love the line, "works to a discipline of ritual undertakings."
Yeah, this is the one that, I knew I liked this song before, but I think this was the one that on my most recent listen to this album for the podcast, this was the one that really stuck out to me the most as being something I'm definitely going to be coming back to in the next couple of weeks.
It's energetic, and it's also midway, it's modulated upwards, but it's done very tastefully. You don't really notice it happening. It's not like on the nose. But it just injects a little bit of energy into it. Track 4, This Free Will.
It's been a long time coming, babe. Long time loose amongst forest.
The first hint of Andrew Giddings' oboe samples on this one. Delightful. I really love how they sound. And again, about the ensemble playing. The guitar and the oboe combine so well together. Such different sounds from such different worlds, if you will. But it just works.
I had the total opposite opinion on the horn sound. The horn really, I don't have a lot to say on this one. To begin with, it wasn't one that really stuck with me that much, but the horn sound really kind of took me out of it. Because
really,
not just the horns, but the string sound as well. It sounds kind of harsh and almost approaching atonal to me at points.
Well, I don't know. I will disagree, because some of the string sounds can, sound synthetic and can sound unnatural. I think the oboe and the clarinet in some other songs they feel like the best samples they could come up with, the best what was available at the time, and they really sound great, I think. And just they contribute to the overall sound, to the overall timbre of the band.
It's funny, I feel like there's something with an oboe in the 90s, like a MIDI oboe. I feel like you can hear that in so many different places, on so many different things from that time period.
Yeah, it could have been, a fashionable sound at the time. There's a moment with the strings. Is it the strings or something else that's kind of brought in and silenced, probably in reverse, maybe? The moment before the line "sharp points" in an ink-black sky. You don't really notice it if not specifically paying attention to what's happening in the background, but it's again a kind of production and arrangement moment that works so well with this song. This is the one where we don't know who played the bass.
Yeah.
And on the bridge, you can hear some really great bass lines underneath.
My guess is that it was Ian, but who knows?
Yeah, he's not credited with that, but it feels like he's stopped writing down everything he did on an album in the credits. Could be. If it was Ian, kudos to him. It's a great part. So they're switching to a 6/4 in the outro. Again, a kind of a progressive moment, giving it a bit of development at the end.
Yeah, I was surprised on a lot of this album how progressive a lot of it was. And I feel like I've said that about a lot of recent Tull albums, but I think just because I haven't heard them in a long time. But I think part of me thought that the progressive side of Tull had kind of declined a bit as they got on. But I think it really was still alive in so many of these later albums.
Yeah. Do you have any observations about the lyrics on this one?
No, I don't have a lot on this one. I think the title, "This Free Will," is interesting, just to see them tackling a subject like free will. but it's not one that stuck out to me much.
Yeah, I think Stuart Wood covered it recently on his channel, and he said that his interpretation of it was that this is a song about like destiny or possibly almost star-crossed lovers who keep meeting throughout their life, throughout different situations, and putting the free will in question, because through that, like, do we decide who we fall in love with? Do we decide who we get to be together with, or is it pre-written? So this situation is making the protagonist question their free will. I don't have much commentary on the lyrics except for the thing I really like it. I think great lyric. I saw some of the listener feedback I noticed about this album. Some people complained about the vocals on this one. I don't know. I don't have a problem with that. I'm acknowledging that not everyone is as much of a fan of Roots to Branches as I am, but I'm not getting convinced by them.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what people think when we put this episode out.
Yeah.
My guess is that most people like this album, but we'll see if I'm wrong. Track 5, Valley.
Wake hard in the morning, see the young girl milking, stream rushing by on a bed of stone.
So this is the track I mentioned that I think this is one of the best Tull songs since the 70s. What do you think?
Wow. I don't know about the best Tull song. I don't think it's a bad song. I really like it. I think the place, probably the cassette track listing was a disservice to it, because it came later. It came on side 2 after Beside Myself. And I remember kind of every time losing focus when listening to it, like not noticing it properly. So maybe it was a choice of which song appeared here that you paid more attention to.
Yeah, I guess to be honest, this was a song I liked before we ever started doing this podcast, but when I listened to the album again recently, I think Out of the Noise actually may have clipped this one a little bit for me, for my enjoyment. But I think that the main acoustic melody of this song ranks up there with some of the finest Ian Anderson acoustic guitar parts. And I think it's a very rare moment in kind of modern Tull, like 90s, 2000s Tull Ian Anderson, where you could see this song coming straight out of 70s Tull. I think it would have fit perfectly back with a lot of that older material.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. The intro flute line is actually Aqualung, but without the first note.
I never knew that. Definitely didn't notice that.
Well, it's not. Well, I never knew that either. I listened to it, played it, and noticed, hey, it's just doing da-da-da-da-dum. And if you just clip the first note of Aqualung and, transpose it, this one's an E. But yeah. But however, while Aqualung is a blues line melodically, it's based on the blues scale. This one, in this one, the dissonant note, the tritone, is interpreted as harmonic minor and not as blues, because we can hear that developing further. At the start, I think I compared a few lines by Martin on one of the previous albums as sounding a little bit like David Gilmour, and this is where I'm also drawing that comparison, and with a few Gilmour lines at the very beginning.
Yeah, I love that. The delayed guitar in the back, it sounds wonderful.
The bass, this is where Dave Pegg is playing bass, and it feels to me like an acoustic double bass. I didn't really get that straight away. I listened to that. At first, the way it was mixed, I thought, is that like key bass, is that double bass samples on a keyboard? But no, it's very clearly a human being playing an acoustic instrument. It's just mixed. It's mic'd possibly with a lot of low end, and it's mixed the same way. On the guitar solo, it kind of, the bass tone changes in a way, but I followed it as I listened, and it doesn't feel like the instrument had changed. I think they probably gave it a little bit of a different treatment on the mixing board, or overdriven it a little bit maybe, because it's accompanying the guitar solo, it doesn't feel like a double bass anymore. But then it does again, and if I listen to it closely, if I follow the lines, it doesn't feel like there's a switch between a bass and a bass guitar. So that's really interesting.
So this song, even though I was praising it a lot and I love it, it's not really perfect for me. And I think the intro is actually one of those things about it I'm not a huge fan of. I kind of think the intro wasn't really necessary for a song like this, especially because of how disconnected it feels to what comes immediately after it, where you have the acoustic part coming in. And it kind of bothers me, especially because I think the sound on, I guess this whole album it's very trebly, you know what I mean? So there's lots of like very high stabs with crash cymbals and things on the intro, which sound extremely trebly in a way that's kind of unpleasant to me, at least.
Yeah, there's another song where I noticed that the cymbals had a bit of too much high end on them.
And so the key sound that also kind of comes in to back up that main guitar melody. This is a good example of a key sound like we were talking about, where it's very overbearing and it's quite cheesy and like aged by today's standards. But I don't really think it takes away that much. And maybe I'm being selective in applying that label of, cheesy key sounds. But sometimes the cheese is what you want. Sometimes it works pretty well and it's kind of charming, and then other times it kind of backfires. And I think this is an example where it works pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't have many comments about the lyrics on this one. This is kind of a picture of neighboring tribes, right, and feuds between neighboring villages.
Yeah.
And I like how, well, I'm saying I don't have much commentary, but I like how sort of where we are, the point of view we're looking at this from, comes across as slightly self-important, slightly too self-important. Like the people of the village that we're in, they're saying, we've got snow melt, sweet water, they've got that valley road that they made.
Yeah.
And it feels like the valley road is a better achievement, isn't it? Than just the natural resource that these people are taking advantage of. I'm unsure about the verse, the Moses verse, because I don't know how it connects to the rest of the story in the song. It clearly sort of outlines the moral codes that these people have and that they are supposed to be following, but I don't think it's not really explored.
Yeah.
So yeah, this album clearly has a theme, up to a point probably, but it has one of the themes is religion and ideas and traditions, if you will, and this is a song that's squarely focused on traditions and how people see themselves within those traditions.
Yeah. My only thing on the lyrics, so I mean, this is kind of a long story because like this is a pretty long song, and the song kind of goes on a journey. It's one of those songs that has big ups and downs and that kind of thing, which is actually something I don't like that much about it. Honestly, I would have kind of preferred if it had just been kind of scaled down into more of like a more traditional acoustic song, I guess, instead of trying to kind of be like a big epic song. But maybe that's suitable for a song called Valley to kind of have peaks and valleys and that kind of thing. But anyway, the only thing I had to say in the lyrics was just that the beginning of this song, both musically and lyrically, it reminds me a lot of like Thick as a Brick, like 1972 era Tull. And I think especially when you have the lyrics describing the valley with the milking girl and all that kind of thing, that immediately makes me think of Thick as a Brick.
The cattle quietly grazing.
Yeah, exactly. That exact verse, yeah. But there are parts, especially kind of later on in this song, where he kind of goes back to like the Catfish Rising voice, if you know what I mean. Which is kind of like a rarity.
Get him off that mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of a rarity on this album, I guess.
Yeah, I know. And possibly this verse kind of sticks out to me as I don't know how it's supposed to connect to the rest of the song.
And there's definite 90s drums later on this song with the reverb.
Track 6, Dangerous Veils.
I'm not one for naming holy names, and I won't speak behind those dangerous veils, though you might hate me just the
Again,
same.
I've stopped commenting on the Phrygian mode because we have it in pretty much every song, but we've got it again. The intro flute line actually has the same notes as Valley, so it kind of feels like a continuation of that. Feels connected to the previous song in this way. Song is a straight 4/4, but I think rhythmically made very exciting by the drum parts and the rest of the instruments, like jazzy moments in it, and I don't know, an exciting song. What do you think?
Yeah, the first thing that immediately stuck out to me was the really complicated drum part, which is obviously that caught my ear immediately as a drummer trying to figure out what's going on. So that was kind of cool to hear. And I don't have a ton on this song, but I thought the chorus is nice. You know, this song doesn't do a lot for me, but I thought it's generally pretty nice, and there's a lot of very interesting parts in it. I think the part that made me kind of stop in my tracks the most is towards the end. I guess I don't know if it's quite the outro, but it's in kind of the later half of the song. There's a part where some kind of jazz standard chords come in, and it literally made me pause the album as I was listening, because it was one of those feelings I got where I immediately recognized that song, but I just couldn't place what it was. And I'm still not entirely sure. It like one of those moments where it reminds you of a song, but you just can't place it. And part of me wants to wonder if I'm thinking of like Cantaloupe Island, if that's like the chords I'm thinking of, but I can't really place it.
I don't think I have that reaction to it. I don't think I'm recognizing something in there. But yeah, there's a jazzy moment in there. I like on the last verse where we have instruments coming in one after the other.
Yeah, it almost gets like math rocky.
Yeah. You've got the flute, and then the little guiro line that goes just quick, the percussive sound. Then the toms very, very quietly in the background. Then the keys, then the guitar, and then a snare line. A snare, probably a roll, right, or just a straight snare build up that builds up to the last verse. Really great. And the outro, feels like, to me, one of the heaviest moments in Tull music.
Yeah.
And quite funky and quite heavy, and with the double bass pedal at the end.
There's also the part, I mean, this is a very eclectic song. There's a part even earlier where they go back into kind of that like jazz standard passage. Complete with like a walking bass line and everything, which I wonder if that was like Steve Bailey's contribution. I guess he was used to that kind of thing, being kind of the player that he was.
Yeah, must have been. This is the one where I was, I think, the most confused with the lyrics. So yeah, it's probably a well-camouflaged horny song, another one. But again, we're past the uncomfortable Ian Anderson of the late 80s, but still there's erotic undertones in here, and I'm questioning whether the line "I'm not inviting any stiff reaction" is supposed to be a double entendre.
I didn't read the lyrics for this one, but he actually does a pretty good job with wordplay, I think, on a lot of these later songs. And you know, .com I think shares a lot of the same kind of like world music influences as this album, from what I remember. And in that way, I really like how kind of playful he is with some of the titles in trying to, you know, draw upon those influences. So with things like Dangerous Veils, which at least for me kind of, you know, makes me think of like an exotic, you know, Middle Eastern Indian locale is kind of what that title makes me think of. And I think he does a good job at creating those kinds of titles, I guess.
Yeah.
Track 7, Beside Myself.
I'm beside myself. I'm beside myself.
So this isn't one that, again, I don't have a lot on this one, but the main thing I remember about how I discovered the song was actually from the Montreux DVD. So the 2003 Montreux DVD, they played this song, I remember. And it's kind of always stuck with me from that, for whatever reason. And I think it's nice. It's, you know, somewhat ballady, I think. A ballady. And I think it's actually a pretty good song for Ian's voice. I think he actually has a pretty good vocal performance on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, this one is actually in G minor, which is like an older key for Ian, which is supposed to be too high for him at this point, but I think he does a good job. Did you notice that in the drum part, the kick drum arrives later than the one?
No, I didn't.
It's not a one drop. It's not like in reggae when you've got the kick drum on the 3. The kick plays on the end of the 1, so it's really syncopated.
I remember, I don't know if this is related, but I remember reading an interview with Ian where he was talking about drummers and Tull drummers and that kind of thing. And he mentioned how Doane Perry has been measured as being like some really specific time, like 0.3 seconds ahead of a metronome. That's kind of what his standard playing is like, and that, you know, every drummer has a different setting that they're used to when it comes to playing on time and that kind of thing. So it kind of made me think of that.
That's interesting, but yeah, here he is later.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying that the beat is well. We don't know where the metronome is, right? Because it's not there anymore. But yeah, he's just interpreting the beat in a very interesting way. He's counting the one just with the hi-hat. Not throughout the song. There's moments on it where the rhythm is more straight, but there's a few really syncopated parts. I have an observation about this one musically, but I would like to first go into the lyrics. He's playing here with the literal meaning of beside myself. Instead of being overcome with feeling, what he's describing here, I think, is talking about being an observer within himself. Being two people, the one that reacts and the one that watches. That duality. Which one of me do you run to? There's in the mind, in the consciousness of a person, there's two parts. Well, at least two parts. The one that's more immediate and the one that is observing what is happening. And in this one, he senses these feelings, these reactions to the tragedies, to the people around him. And he acknowledges these feelings, but it's not himself that is overcome with. And musically, there's a thing which is, well, tenuous. You can say I'm making this up. I probably am. The song is the harmony in the song is based around, very heavily based around two chords. It's based around G minor and C major 7. And the interesting thing about these two chords, they appear in the chorus, they appear in the opening lines of the verse, is that these are the same chord, but with a different root note. So if you do this on a keyboard, if you play a G minor in the right hand, and then just play a G in the left hand in the bass, then you have a G minor chord. If you keep the same chord in the right hand and play a C in the left, you've got a C major 7. There's a duality. There's a different. It's the same sound being recontextualized into acquiring a different meaning. It's the two people within one person. The same chord sounds differently depending on what note we are looking at it from. And I think this musical metaphor sort of represents what is going on in the song. And it is, I'm sure, that no one thought about this when writing this song, neither Ian or Andy or anyone else. But the ambiguity in the harmony and the melodic lines in relation to the chords, it contributes to the feeling of ambiguity of the self, which Ian is describing. So that's my armchair musicologist take on what Beside Myself is about.
You mentioned the lyrics of this song. I seem to remember hearing or reading or something from Ian a long time ago that this song is actually about child prostitution in India. Mm-hmm. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember where I heard that, but it was an interview or something.
Well, it's quite evident from the lyrics, you know. I'll wish you up a silver train to carry you to school, bring you home again, strip off that work paint.
Okay.
And put a cleaner face on. He's talking about a woman who's wearing makeup for work.
Yeah.
So, you know. Yeah, but it is also about a person reacting to that and the feeling of that. How do you not let yourself be overcome with emotion, be overcome with compassion, if you will? Mm-hmm. I'm beside myself. Which one of me do you run to? So there's layers in this one.
Yeah.
Track 8, Wounded, Old and Treacherous. This is very likely one of my favorite songs on the album. Mm-hmm. As I was researching what people think. Well, I wasn't researching what people think. I was researching whether people had ideas about the meaning, specific meanings in the song "Dangerous Veils," but I haven't found that. I saw someone refer to this song as embarrassing, and no. This is a wonderful song. I really love it. I really love the 7/8 flute line. One of the things about it, this is not my idea at the outset. I shared this song with someone, and they said it reminded them of Frank Zappa, and I immediately saw what they mean.
Yeah.
They didn't point out a specific song, but over time, I think one of the songs I can draw a direct comparison to is Cosmic Debris by Frank Zappa from the album Apostrophe. That sort of unhurried, almost spoken word delivery of the verse contrasting with the higher energy melodic chorus is one of the things that Frank Zappa did a lot. And one of the things I noticed this time as I was listening to it, there's a keyboard line after the first chorus, after the little melodic insert, the little melodic bridge after the first chorus, so it ends on that. It's a key line that doesn't appear elsewhere on the song. It's a one-off. I'm not sure what the sound is supposed to be, what kind of instrument sample that is. It's a little bit percussive. It's not a straightforward marimba keyboard marimba, sampled marimba. It's something else. But that line immediately put me in mind of Ruth Underwood, the mallet player for Frank Zappa, the famous marimba and other malleted instruments player, who was one of the stars of Frank Zappa's live band. So again, I'm not sure they were directly referencing Zappa, but something about that song made Andy play that line, if you know what I mean. And I think it was kind of just channeling the spirit of Frank at that point.
Yeah, I can see that. I've never really tried to get into Zappa, really, which I think is kind of surprising for a lot of Tull fans, because I know a lot of Tull fans, there's a big overlap between Tull fans and Zappa fans, I think. But I know enough about Zappa to know what his style is like, and I agree that this is kind of in that wheelhouse. This song really surprised me when I listened to this album. I'm sure I've heard this before, but it's been a while, but it really stuck out to me. The central melody is so groovy on this one. It's really amazing, and I love how they mess with it kind of over time as it comes back and goes away. So there's kind of a part later on where there's this interplay between the snare and that central flute melody, and it just sounds so great. The way that it sounds very addicting, the way that they meld those two together.
Yeah. This melody comes in twice as a sort of solo throughout the song, and in the middle there's the snare follows it, and they're playing a 7 together. And the second time it does that, they do that, they superimpose this 7/8 flute line over a straight 4/4 in the drums, and the flute kind of is playing circles around it and repeating the theme until it kind of breaks out the 7/8 into a solo, breaks out of repeating that melody into improvising, into soloing, and that is a fantastic moment. I've always absolutely loved that.
Yeah. And that melody, it's very, like, I don't know how else to say this, but it's really emblematic of the mid-90s. I don't know if that makes any sense, but just the way that melody sounds, it sounds like the 90s to me.
Really?
And I don't know what other way I can put that.
Not just the 90s Tull, just the 90s.
No, just the period. 90s period. Like,
wow.
Just something about the way that the notes that were chosen for that melody, it represents the 90s to me. The mid to late 90s specifically. I don't know if I can really explain why, though. It just feels that way to me.
Oh, that's fascinating. I've never thought about it like that.
And one more 90s thing on this song I'll mention too is, so the piano sound, the piano that kind of like lazily stabs in and out when Ian is doing that little talking thing. I don't know if it's exactly this same sound, but it's very similar. It's really similar to like the classic 90s house sound. So I'm a huge fan of house music. It's one of my favorite genres in the world. And when you listen to, classic house, like Golden Age house of the 80s and 90s, they have this incredible piano sound. This just really bright, really kind of hot piano sound that really sticks in your mind. And it's a very similar sound to what is being played here.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of electric piano that is. I'm not sure. I'm sure some of our commenters will enlighten us. I hope so. It kind of sort of reminds me of a Yamaha electric piano, but what do I know? Really can't comment with any kind of expertise. This is the one where the cymbals felt to me extra jangly.
Oh, yeah.
In the later part of the song. Again, Martin is playing some pinch harmonics on the guitar solo, but they're, again, in here quite tasteful. They're not overwhelming, and is not leaning into them. And a few other things. There's a very quiet organ line in the background of the first verse, and of the verse that goes a walk on the quiet side. So both times. It's barely audible, it's not forward, but there's a few very, very tasty organ lines. In terms of lyrics, it has a bit of a callback to Bungle in the Jungle, in my mind at least. It's a little cryptic, it may be referencing, again, films or literature that I'm not aware of, but it kind of gives me the vibe of sort of a serenade of the concrete jungle with a bit of a film noir, hard-boiled main character strolling through that. And as I was thinking about that, like, I talked about one of the songs on Catfish Rising having to me, a fantasy book vibe. If anyone, I don't know if you read, because you're not much into fantasy, I think you probably haven't. If anyone has read The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, it's a series of urban fantasy novels about a magician detective. This song suddenly felt to me like this could be the main theme to the Dresden Files, because it has that kind of atmosphere to it.
Yeah, it's a really weird song. It's not really a song I would expect Tull to make, but I think it's cool. It has this kind of weird swagger to it that Tull has not really done before.
Yeah, I was a little bit afraid that you wouldn't like it.
No, it's cool. I mean, I think that the main melody, I mean, whatever else happens in the song, I think that's an amazing melody, and I really loved listening to it.
Yeah, it's also quite long.
Yeah, it is.
And I think I was expecting you to say, yeah, it's fine if only it were a little bit shorter.
Well, none of the long songs on here are too offensive to me. That was actually something that I was thinking about, honestly. There was a couple songs on here where I was trying to think, would I prefer that this be shorter? And I didn't really come to a conclusion where I really thought that, except maybe Valley, just because I kind of wish that Valley was a different kind of song than it ended up being, but, whatever. Track 9, At Last Forever.
I didn't promise to stay the pace. Not in this lifetime, babe, but we'll cling together.
So this is another kind of older ballad type song, I would say. But the thing that is so interesting is that, we've talked about the tired hotel ballads of the past couple albums, of which I do think that there are some on this album, particularly in this kind of last stretch of tracks on the second side. However, I feel like there's a difference this time, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like the old ballad songs on this album have so much more effort put into them than the past couple of albums. What do you think?
Yeah, I will agree. Well, this one doesn't feel like a tired hotel type thing at all, because it explores a completely different feeling. It's very poignant. It's, again, we have these oboe samples and clarinet, which we've established that you don't like a lot, but again, I think they work really well here. There's a very straightforward kind of emotional manipulation at the beginning, where there's a major to minor switch in this oboe melody, but it's very. It's not out of place. It does what it is supposed to be doing, because this song is exploring death. This song is exploring the feeling of leaving people behind, and of the feeling of being left behind when someone dies. And yeah, I don't really have a lot to explain here.
I do think this song would be a lot better with real strings and real horns. I think it kind of drags it down for me, kind of the syntheticness of it.
Oh, everything could be better with real strings and real horns instead of samples, but that's what they had. I like when the strings come in, the last notes that they arrive on are so delightfully thick. They have so much low end in them and just sound very powerful. Rhythmically, they do very nice work with 3/4 around the middle of the song. And this is Steve Bailey, is it? On bass.
Yeah.
I think he's playing a fretless, it sounds to me.
Some of the acoustic guitar work on this song reminded me a lot of Jacqueline. It sounded very reminiscent of that.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Again, not much to comment on about the lyrics, because it's all there. And it's what I said, it's an exploration of death and life that continues when people walk out of our lives.
Yeah, this is one of the more low-key tracks on the album, I'd say.
It's quite, emotionally it's quite heavy to listen to. So it's not a light-hearted sort of listen and forget ballads. It has an impact, and I think it's delivered quite well. Track 10, Stuck in the August Rain.
But I'm still stuck in the August rain, stuck out in the cloudburst once again.
I think in the album track listing, a welcome song after At Last Forever. sort of an enough about death. This is probably the poppiest track on the album, but I do enjoy it. On this last stretch of songs, we are well out of the Eastern influences, it feels like.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's any of that anymore. Even beginning with probably Wounded Old and Treacherous.
Yeah, I agree.
That one had a few Phrygian moments in it, but since the last 3 tracks, completely free of that, and just I think it kind of works as a palate cleanser. Just something a little bit different to finish off. This one, very cleverly, it modulates upwards twice throughout the song. There's 3 verses, and each verse is a whole tone up from the previous one, and you don't really notice it when they do it. It just, again, it's so cleverly done. It's done differently both times, so it doesn't seem like they're repeating, like they're retracing their own steps throughout the song. And the first time they do that, they just stay the chord they landed on, they stay on it and sort of pretend it's the new center. And the second time they do it, it's a noticeable jump, but it's in the middle of an instrumental section, so you don't really notice that they're establishing a new center for the upcoming verse. A new moment musically in terms of keyboards, there's a brass patch that's appearing.
Yeah.
Again, yes, it's not real brass. It would have been better if it were real brass, but I think it's nice. I think it gives it a good sort of a fresh sound compared to the previous songs.
A lot of my opinions on this song are kind of similar to both of the previous song and the next song, to be honest. But I feel like it's a slow-moving ballad, but I still feel like there's more life here than in the past couple of albums that tried to do similar songs like this. And, I think a lot of the melodies here are not bad. I don't think this is an offensive song by any means. I think it might have been a better song if Ian's voice was stronger, because I think, like I mentioned, I think this was kind of where he was starting to go for stuff that was a little difficult for him. But yeah, I don't know. I probably would never choose to listen to this out of my own free will, but I don't think it's bad for what it's trying to be. I can't really fault it too much.
It's got a pastoral sort of feel to it, like songs like Wandering Aloud, but it has a slightly darker side. It pictures a pastoral moment, but the person who's experiencing it cannot be in that moment. In their head, they're somewhere different. They're stuck in the August train. They haven't processed some events in their life that keep haunting them.
Yeah,
this is what it feels like. Single-minded in my gloom. But this is where the song has a hopeful tone to it. So even though the person is stuck, it feels like they are getting over it.
Yeah.
In the context of the previous song, one may imagine that this is the death of a loved one that they are still experiencing and re-experiencing.
Yeah, I can see that. Track 11, Another Harry's Bar.
Another Harry's Bar. Or that's the tale they tell. But Harry's long gone now, and the customers as well.
So I kind of feel like this song is similar to the last one in the sense that I think this one and Stuck in the August Rain are actually fairly different from the rest of the album. And it almost I don't think this is the case, but in a way they almost sound like they're from different sessions from the rest of the album. But I don't think that's what happened. This song particularly, it kind of reverts almost to Catfish Rising in a way. It kind of gives me
this is what I have written down. It's maybe the closest to Catfish Rising.
Yeah, it kind of gives me a similar vibe. But I still think there's some nice musical parts in this one. But when in the very beginning in Crest of a Knave, when I mentioned Tired Old Hotel Ballroom Ballad, this was like the quintessential song I was thinking of when I thought of those kinds of songs. But I don't know. I mean, I would never choose to listen to this, but I think it's really not that bad for what it is. I think it's not. If you had a tier list of these kinds of kind of old ballad songs, I think it wouldn't be at the bottom, I would say.
Yeah, it would definitely be up there with the Rocks on the Road, I feel. Yeah, I agree that this is the closest to the previous album as we get on Roots to Branches. It is a little bit similar to Stuck in the August Train. Stuck in the August Train is an epilogue. This is a postscript. And it feels to me a little bit like they had both of these songs and they couldn't choose which one would be the better ending, so they stuck them both on. And in this regard, they sort of feel, both of these songs together feel like a bit of a redundant ending. It could have been either one. And after Stuck in the August Rain, this one is like, okay, maybe let's have a little more about death, but in a fun way.
Yeah.
Dave Peck is on the double bass again, who gives it a more acoustic, more intimate probably sound. And the vocals are mixed in a more intimate way. They're closer to us than in the previous song.
Yeah.
So that's what gives it an epilogue after the epilogue, a postscript. But yeah, I don't dislike it. The outro is nice. They have a bit of a fake out ending, and then the outro that picks you up in just the right way.
Yeah.
After the end, and there's a great like a 6/8 polymetric line in the keys.
I haven't talked a lot about lyrics on this album, but this is one song where the lyrics are kind of interesting to me, just because the subject of it is quite mysterious in a way that's kind of cool, about this like bar that doesn't exist, you know. And I guess it's kind of a nostalgia song, you know. It's thinking back to a bar and a community that used to be, which is not anymore, and kind of the sadness of that, which I think is something that anybody who grows up can attest to as times change. And, you know, times are surely changing now in the year 2022. So it's kind of something that I think people can relate to, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a legacy. It's like there's a bar called Harry's, but it's not the same Harry's that it used to be, because Harry isn't around. But still there only in the name and in the memories of those who remember him, pardon the tautology.
Yeah, and I think this was something I had wanted to talk about on this podcast, and I guess this is the best place to deploy it. And I don't know how much this will make sense to people, but I have this theory that the period around which you were born is, for every person, that's a very nostalgia tinged period. You know, even though you weren't necessarily around to really remember things necessarily, you know. So, for example, to me, the late 90s, the early 2000s is like this magical time in history that will never be repeated. To me, like, there's so many things that were happening at that period of time in history that were so innovative and unique and special that we will have never seen since then, and we will never see again. And to me, this song, it kind of is about that feeling to me. And part of it is kind of complicated also for me, because this album kind of came out like in that period, you know, like in the mid 90s, which to me was like a very, it's like a special period of time in a bottle that you'll never be able to get again. But I kind of suspect that everybody feels that way about whatever period of time they were born in. So there's kind of a connection between this song and that kind of feeling to me, although I don't know if that's a stretch on my part.
No, I see what you mean. It's a song about memories.
Yeah.
And it's a song about something you're not getting back, but you're still getting it back in your mind.
Yeah. I think it's just the feeling of remembering something and being the only person on Earth who really still has that memory, you know?
Yeah, but the protagonist in this song latches onto this memory and uses it to drive them forward, will make this world turn right. You know, what they have from the past will help them move forward.
But it's a really surprising ending for an album like this, I feel like. I mean, if you look at where this album was on track 1 and where it is on track 11, it's a really different place. It's kind of interesting.
It's been a journey.
Yeah. And I think part of, like, it's just because in the last several tracks, the whole ethnic world music thing is completely out the window. Like, it's nowhere to be found on a lot of the second half of the album.
Yeah, probably. Well, 3 tracks at least, like I said. I think that this song is here because it's more hopeful than Stuck in the August Rain. Like, either of these 2 songs could have been the last one.
Yeah.
And either of these songs could have probably been omitted. I'm not saying I don't like them. I'm not saying I resent that they're both here. I love that they're both here. But sort of the feeling on how the album ends is a little ambiguous, because to me it ends twice. It ends on Stuck in the August Rain, and it ends on Another Harry's Bar. And Harry's Bar is more hopeful, and this is the feeling they chose to end the album on.
I have one last story to tell about this song. Which
do go on.
Yeah, this is kind of this is like a personal thing, but it's just something that this song always makes me think of. You know, you kind of had your story on Slow Marching Band on Broadsword about something personal to you that was related to the song, and I guess this is kind of mine. So my best friend growing up, his parents owned a hotel, and they still own a hotel, but in a different state. And they would always have to take him to the hotel while they were working, like during summer break and stuff like that. And so he would just kind of like be hanging out in his parents' hotel doing nothing all day. And a lot of the time he would call me to come over to his hotel and just to, you know, to play games or whatever to keep him company. And they had a restaurant in this hotel, and I don't remember the exact name, but I think it was Harry's Bar and Restaurant, or it was Harry's Restaurant or something like that. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but this restaurant was never open, ever. I have no idea what the deal was. But the parents would always stick him in this like empty, abandoned restaurant in that side of the hotel. And so that's where I would always go to meet him. And so when I think of this song, it kind of makes me think of that. I think of hours and hours spent with my friend as a kid in this, suitably abandoned Harry's Restaurant and Bar, which is, it kind of makes me think of this song.
That's cool. It's really cool. It's one of the things that this isn't what the song is about, but it adds another dimension to it. And this is not what the main character of the song is doing, like having a drink with a dog. Yeah. But it's like you could see that person there as you were in that abandoned restaurant.
Yeah, it's the same idea of like the abandoned restaurant where you never see a soul. Also, and just also coincidentally called Harry's.
Or maybe not coincidentally.
Yeah. The restaurant, from a time period that you will never be able to access again. The same type of feeling.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for this story.
So, in conclusion, when we talk about this album, I actually kind of felt like this album was more difficult to talk about than I was expecting, I guess. But my general take on it is that I agree that it's the best. I mean, it's certainly the best album of the 90s, in my opinion. But there's moments on this album that I think are really kind of highs that the band hadn't hit since, for me, it would be Under Wraps. For a normal Tull fan, it would probably be like, Broadsword or earlier.
Yeah, as we've established, I've slightly come around on Under Wraps. Not to become a massive fan of it, but now I can see what they were doing. But probably to me, this is the most underrated Jethro Tull album. This is one of the albums I like a lot, and I don't think enough people do, like you do with Under Wraps. And, I can't really, I'm sure lots of people can't rank the albums in a once and for all in an order that makes sense, right? You can't really put them one after the other in terms of quality and in terms of how much you like them. It changes. And even on those tier list, things that people make and that you and I made as well at one point, these tiers to me, like when I look at them, in my mind, there's the albums on there start just bobbing up and down. Like these are not straight lines they are sitting on. These lines are curved and they're moving.
Yeah.
Depending on the time of year, depending on the mood, depending on the place I'm in psychologically at a given moment in life, an album will make more sense to me. I will enjoy it more than another, and then it'll change then it will change in a year or less. And this one is definitely up there. It's not, I don't think it can bob up and down so ferociously that it can ever like out bob a Passion Play in my mind. But it's absolutely up there with my most favorite Tull albums that come after Passion Play and Thick as a Brick. It's together. It can be on the same rung as Benefit, Stormwatch, Minstrel in the Gallery. Certainly. It's certainly always as good as Broadsword and the Beast in my mind. It's just sometimes it's in my mind it's better than the Broadsword and the Beast.
The main thing that stuck out to me on this one is that I thought the first half was a lot better than the second. Do you feel that there's like a divide on this album for you?
No, not at all. It's different, but it doesn't feel like that to me.
All of my favorite tracks on this one are from the first half, and all of my least favorite are in the second half.
I have great difficulty picking least favorite tracks here. I can't really slide them so much. So what are yours?
Well, I have 3 clear-cut favorites for sure.
Okay.
And that is Valley, Out of the Noise, and Rare and Precious Chain. Those are the 3 songs that I would definitely go out of my way to listen to outside of the context of the album, just kind of in my own listening. And I've said this for the past couple albums, I think, but I don't really like to pick least favorites on this one because there's not anything that is like, immediately offensive to me. But if I had to pick 3, I would say At Last Forever, just because it doesn't do much for me. Stuck in the August Rain, even though I kind of like it, it's a little too low-key, I guess, for me. And I have another Harry's Bar as my third one, but I feel kind of bad picking it. So I'm looking through my notes, wanting to see if I want to pick a different one instead. And,
you don't have to,
I don't know. I might, maybe This Free Will instead of Harry's Bar as my third least favorite. But I don't feel strongly on the least favorites again on this one.
It's extremely difficult for me to pick least favorites and favorites as well, because I know Wounded Old and Treacherous is probably my favorite one on the album, but it's not far ahead at all from your favorites, from Out of the Noise, from Rare and Precious Chain, from Dangerous Veils, from Beside Myself. And I can't pick 3 because Wounded Old and Treacherous will definitely be in the 3, but then it will be a rotating cast of songs. And for the least favorite, I don't think it's possible for me to pick. I thought I was going to pick another Harry's Bar, just because of the redundancy. Stuck in the August Rain is the epilogue, and another Harry's Bar is another epilogue, and which one? But after your story, I can't even I can't pick it in good conscience. No, so maybe August Rain. Maybe it's a tie between August Rain and Harry's. Maybe, but Stuck in the August Rain is also a great song. I will refuse to pick the least favorite song.
We almost had this we were always pretty aligned there.
Yeah, but I can't pick At Last Forever as my least favorite. It's such a beautiful and emotional song.
Thanks everybody for listening. We only have one album left in I guess you'd call the pre-2022 discography. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks with .com as we kind of close out the old discography.
See you. Cheers.
Thanks.